On prom night, Maplewood's golden couple Jake Thompson and Emily Carter vanished without a trace, leaving a town fractured by grief and suspicion. Whispers pointed to Tom Sullivan, the troubled outsider, whose silence and disappearance only deepened the wound. But when Mike unearthed Emily's torn dress and a cryptic note from the buried time capsule 18 years later, the past refused to stay hidden. And just listen to how shocking the twist in this drama turned out to be, and why justice ultimately prevailed. The air was thick with excitement as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the small town of Maplewood. It was prom night, and the high school gymnasium had been transformed into a wonderland of twinkling fairy lights and shimmering decorations. Laughter and music spilled out into the parking lot, where parents snapped photos of their children clad in elegant gowns and sharp tuxedos. Among the throng, two figures stood out: Jake Thompson and Emily Carter, the beloved couple of senior year. Jake, with his tousled brown hair and easy smile, had always been a favorite. He was the star quarterback, the kind of boy who could charm anyone with just a wink. Emily, petite and vivacious, had captured hearts with her infectious laughter and radiant spirit. Together they were the embodiment of young love, and their relationship was the envy of their peers. But beneath the surface of their idyllic romance lay secrets that would soon unravel. As the evening wore on, Jake pulled Emily away from the crowd, leading her to a secluded corner of the schoolyard. The stars sparkled overhead, and the scent of blooming jasmine filled the air. "Can you believe this night?" Jake said, looking into Emily's eyes. "It feels like a dream." Emily smiled, but there was a flicker of worry in her gaze. "I know, but I can't shake this feeling. Like something's about to happen." Jake brushed off her concerns. "It's just nerves. We've been looking forward to this for months. Let's make it memorable." But as they shared a kiss, little did they know that this moment would be their last as a couple. The darkness of the night concealed more than just the stars. It hid secrets that would change everything. The next morning, Maplewood was rocked by the news. Jake and Emily had vanished. A search party was formed almost immediately, with volunteers scouring the woods, fields, and nearby rivers. The town was a flurry of activity, each resident hoping to find some trace of the beloved couple. Emily's parents, devastated and frantic, were among the first to gather at the school, where students whispered and exchanged theories. Some thought they had run away together. Others suspected foul play. Detective Mark Jennings, a seasoned investigator with deep ties to the community, was assigned to the case. He was known for his dogged persistence and keen instincts, but even he felt the weight of the tragedy. "We'll find them," he promised the gathered crowd. "We will leave no stone unturned." As days turned into weeks, the search continued, but no clues appeared. Posters with the couple's smiling faces plastered the town, but hope began to fade. Rumors swirled about a local man, Tom Sullivan, who had a history of trouble with the law. He had been seen lurking near the school that night, and whispers of his involvement grew louder. The atmosphere in Maplewood shifted from hope to suspicion. Friends of Jake and Emily turned against one another, each blaming the other for the couple's disappearance. The town was divided, and the once close-knit community now harbored secrets of its own. As the months dragged on, Emily's parents, consumed by grief, became reclusive. Jake's family, on the other hand, sought solace in the media spotlight, appearing on talk shows and pleading for information. But the case went cold. 18 years later, the landscape of Maplewood had transformed. New families moved in, old buildings were renovated or torn down, and the memory of Jake and Emily faded into a distant memory. The high school gym, once the site of their last dance, was now set for demolition to make way for a new convenience store. On the day of the demolition, a crew of workers gathered early to prepare. Among them was Mike, a burly man in his 40s with a weathered face and a heart of gold. He had grown up in Maplewood and remembered the tragic story of the young couple. "Anyone know what they're going to do with the time capsule?" Mike asked the crew, referring to the sealed box buried beneath the gym floor, filled with memorabilia from the graduating class of 2005. "Probably just toss it," replied Greg, the foreman, shrugging. "Old junk, right?" Mike frowned, a sense of unease creeping in. "You know, we should dig it up. Someone might want it." "Suit yourself," Greg said, rolling his eyes. "But we've got a job to do." Undeterred, Mike grabbed a shovel and set to work, digging carefully along the gym floor, With each scoop of dirt, he felt a mix of nostalgia and sadness for the young couple who had loved so deeply. As he dug deeper, his shovel struck something hard. "What the?" he muttered, clearing away the dirt to reveal a weathered box. It was old and unmarked, but he could feel the weight of history in his hands. "Hey guys, I think I found something," he called out, excitement tinged with apprehension. The crew gathered around, their curiosity piqued. Mike pried open the box, and inside, he found a trove of letters, photographs, and trinkets. But as he sifted through the contents, his heart raced when he pulled out a small, torn piece of fabric. It was a dress, Emily's dress, the one she had worn to prom. That's impossible," Greg stuttered, stepping back. "Where did you get that?" "I don't know, but it was buried here," Mike replied, panic rising in his chest as he held up the fabric to the light. "This is from the night they disappeared." As the crew processed the shocking discovery, Mike's pulse quickened. The excitement of unearthing a piece of history was overshadowed by the realization that they may have just stumbled onto a clue that could lead to justice for Jake and Emily after all these years. The emotional weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. What had once been a tale of love lost was now intertwined with a dark mystery, waiting to be uncovered. "Call the police," Mike said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "We need to get this to the authorities. Now." With the memory of Jake and Emily lingering in their minds, the crew knew they had crossed a threshold. They had uncovered a secret that could finally bring justice to the couple who had vanished on prom night, their story far from over. The sound of crunching gravel beneath Mike's heavy work boots echoed in the chilly morning air as he stepped away from the freshly unearthed time capsule. Heart racing, he pulled out his phone, the screen illuminating his face against the dreary backdrop of the old gymnasium. He pressed the numbers for Detective Mark Jennings, his hands trembling slightly. "Come on, pick up," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder as if the shadows themselves might offer him a warning. The line clicked, and Jennings's voice broke through the static, a familiar blend of warmth and urgency. "Jennings. Detective, it's Mike from the Demolition crew. You need to get down here. We found something. Something from the prom night. Jake and Emily." Silence hung thick in the air before Jennings replied, his tone shifting, now laced with intrigue. "What did you find?" Mike took a deep breath, suddenly aware of the weight of his discovery. "It's a time capsule. I'm not sure what else is in there, but it has part of Emily's dress." There was a moment of stillness on the other end. "I'll be there in 10. As Mike hung up, the chill of the morning seeped into his bones. He felt the weight of the past press against him, as if the very walls of the gym held the echoes of laughter and dancing, a bittersweet reminder of what had once been. The gym was a shell of its former self. Once filled with the joyous shouts of students and the rhythmic thump of basketballs, it now stood silent, the air thick with dust and memories. Faded banners hung limply from the rafters, and the scent of mildew lingered in the corners. Mike's eyes drifted to the stage where he had once watched the crowning of prom royalty. It felt like only yesterday, but time had a cruel way of erasing the vibrant moments, leaving behind only shadows. Minutes later, the whir of a police cruiser broke the stillness as Jennings pulled up, his expression a complex blend of hope and skepticism. Mike waved him over, pointing to the spot where the capsule lay half buried in the earth, a small mound of dirt still clinging to it. As Jennings knelt beside the capsule, a frown creased his forehead. "Mike, are you sure this is connected?" "Emily's dress, detective. I swear it's from that night." With careful fingers, Jennings brushed away the last remnants of soil, revealing the weathered box. Its edges were rusted, but the latch still held tight, a testament to the mystery contained within. The detective glanced up at Mike, his eyes narrowing with a mix of determination and dread. "Let's get this open." With a swift motion, Jennings pried the capsule open, the metal creaking in protest. Inside, nestled among crumpled notes and faded photographs, lay a silken scrap of fabric, unmistakably a piece of Emily's prom dress. Its vibrant blue was dulled with age, but glimpses of its former brilliance still shone through. "Look at this," Jennings said, holding the fabric up to the light. "It's definitely from that night. We need to take this back to the station for analysis." Mike nodded, his heart pounding as he imagined the implications. What if it leads us somewhere? What if it finally uncovers what really happened to them? Jennings regarded him, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. We can't get ahead of ourselves, but this could be the break we've been looking for. As they gathered the items from the capsule, Mike's gaze fell upon a crumpled piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a hastily written note. The words were barely legible, but the urgency in the scrawl was palpable. If they find this, I'm sorry. I had to protect you both. Trust no one. Asterisk. A chill ran down Mike's spine as he read the note aloud. What does this mean? Who wrote it? Jennings's eyes darkened, a shadow passing across his face. That's the question, isn't it? We need to find out who this is from and what they knew. They worked in silence, the gravity of the moment settling heavily over them. The mystery of Jake and Emily's disappearance loomed larger than ever, twisting through Mike's mind like a vine choking the life from the past. When they finished collecting the items, Jennings glanced at Mike, a new resolve etched on his features. Let's head back to the station and see if we can make sense of this. We owe it to them. As they made their way to the cruiser, Mike couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The streets of Maplewood were quiet, the town seemingly holding its breath in anticipation. The memories of that fateful night in 2005 still haunted its corridors, whispering secrets that had lingered too long in silence. At the police station, the walls were lined with photographs and case files, remnants of a community still grappling with the unresolved tragedy. Jennings led Mike into his office, where a corkboard displayed the faces of those who had been affected by the disappearance. Jake and Emily's smiles shone brightly from the center, a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere that enveloped the room. Let's see what we can dig up, Jennings said, pulling the fabric and note from a folder. He laid them carefully on the desk, his brow furrowing in concentration. Mike watched as Jennings began to sift through old case files, each one a piece of the puzzle that had eluded them for nearly 2 decades. The detective's fingers paused on a file titled Tom Sullivan. Here's where it gets complicated, Jennings said, his voice low. Tom was the prime suspect back then, but nothing ever stuck. The town turned against him, but he always maintained his innocence. Do you think he was involved? Mike asked, the question tumbling forth with a weight of its own. It's hard to say, Jennings replied, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. But now with this new evidence, it might be time to revisit old leads and see if anything connects. Mike felt a surge of adrenaline. What if the note is from Tom? What if he was trying to warn them? That's a possibility, Jennings conceded, but we need more than speculation. I'll reach out to some of the witnesses from that night. As Jennings made a call, Mike's mind raced. He thought of the faces of their classmates who had danced and laughed while Jake and Emily disappeared. The betrayal that had fractured their community seemed almost tangible. Mike, Jennings interrupted his thoughts, his voice urgent. Can you remember anything from that night? Anything at all? The question hung in the air, and Mike closed his eyes, trying to sift through the haze of memories. He could see the twinkling fairy lights, hear the music drifting through the air, taste the excitement on his tongue. But there was something else, something just out of reach. I remember they wanted to sneak out for a moment, just the two of them. They were so in love and they thought it would be fun. Jennings leaned in closer, his expression intent. Did you ever see them after that? Mike shook his head, frustration building within him. No, I was busy with my date, but I wish I had gone with them. I could have stopped whatever happened. The detective's eyes softened. You were a kid, Mike. None of us could have known. Just then the phone rang again, interrupting the tension. Jennings answered, his voice steady and professional. Jennings. Mike watched him closely, the detective's features shifting from curiosity to concern. What do you mean? Are you sure? He hung up the phone and turned to Mike, his expression grave. We have a lead. Someone just came forward claiming they saw Jake and Emily on prom night. They're at the diner. We need to go. Mike's heart surged with hope and fear, a cocktail of emotions swirling within him. Let's go. As they rushed out of the station, the whispers of the past loomed around them like a thick fog, each step resonating with the promise of answers long buried. The diner was a hub of activity, its neon sign flickering like a heartbeat against the backdrop of the night. Inside, the smell of coffee and fries filled the air, mixing with the nervous energy that buzzed through the crowd. They approached a booth in the corner where an older woman with silver hair and anxious eyes sat fidgeting with her hands. "Mrs. Miller," Jennings asked gently, recognizing her from the case files. "Yes, that's me," she replied, her voice quivering. "I saw them that night. I saw Jake and Emily." Mike felt a rush of anticipation. They were finally getting closer to the truth. "What did you see?" Jennings prompted, pulling out a notepad. Mrs. Miller took a deep breath, her gaze distant as she recalled the memories. "They were arguing. No, not arguing. It was more like discussing something important. I thought they were just being teenagers, but then I saw someone else with them." "Who?" Jennings pressed, leaning in closer. Her eyes widened, fear creeping into her expression. "I didn't see their face, but they seemed angry. I was too scared to intervene. I didn't want to get involved." "Why didn't you come forward before?" Mike asked, his heart racing. "I was afraid," she admitted, tears glistening in her eyes. "The whole town was in an uproar. I didn't want to stir the pot. But now that you've found something, I feel I have to tell you." Jennings nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "Can you remember anything else? Anything about that person?" Mrs. Miller shook her head, visibly shaken. "No, only that they were tall and wearing a dark jacket. I wish I had done more." As the weight of her words sank in, Mike felt the pieces of the puzzle beginning to shift. The shadows of that night were still haunting them, but perhaps, just perhaps, they were finally on the brink of revealing the truth. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller," Jennings said, his voice firm yet compassionate. "We'll do everything we can to find out what happened that night." As they left the diner, Mike felt a surge of determination pulsing through him. They were no longer just digging through the past. They were unearthing a truth that had been buried long enough. With every step, he could feel the weight of Jake and Emily's memory guiding them forward, pushing them toward justice that was long overdue. The echoes of their laughter mingled with the whispers of the night, and for the first time in 18 years, the shadows felt a little less oppressive. Something was shifting in Maplewood, and the promise of resolution hung in the air like the first breath of spring after a long, dark winter. The air felt thick with anticipation as Detective Mark Jennings drove toward the Maplewood Town Hall, his mind racing with the implications of Mike's discovery. The faded gray of the sky mirrored his thoughts, a blanket of clouds heavy with the promise of rain. 18 years had passed since he last felt the weight of this case so acutely. But now, with new evidence in hand, the past surged back like a wave crashing against the shore. He parked his car in front of the old brick building, its red facade worn but still standing strong, much like the community it served. As he stepped out, the scent of damp earth filled his lungs, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee wafting from the nearby cafe. The familiar sights of Maplewood rustic lampposts in the town square adorned with blooming flowers brought a bittersweet nostalgia. This was a town forever marked by the disappearance of two of its brightest stars. Inside, the walls of Town Hall held decades of memories, the hallways echoing with the whispers of citizens who had come and gone. Mark made his way to the small, cluttered office that had once buzzed with the energy of his younger self, a rookie detective eager to make his mark. Now it felt like a tomb, filled with remnants of unsolved cases and faded photographs. He settled into his chair, the leather creaking under his weight, and opened the file on Jake and Emily. It was a time-worn collection of notes, witness statements, and news clippings. As he flipped through the pages, his heart sank. So many leads had gone cold. So many lives had been disrupted, and yet here was a chance, a glimmer of hope. With a sense of urgency, he pulled out his phone and dialed Mike. The phone rang twice before the burly worker's voice came through, a mix of confusion and excitement. "Detective Jennings," Mike said, his tone eager. "Did you find anything else in the time capsule?" "Not yet," Mark replied, "but I need you to meet me at the diner. We need to talk about what you found and the next steps for this investigation." "Sure thing. I'll be there in 10. After hanging up, Mark leaned back in his chair, the creaking leather a reminder of the weight he bore. Memories of Jake and Emily flooded his mind, their laughter, their dreams, the way they lit up the dim hallways of Maplewood High. Their absence had left a scar, and now, The chance to mend that wound felt like a daunting responsibility. The diner was a staple of the community, a place where stories were shared over steaming cups of coffee and plates of greasy comfort food. The bell above the door jingled as Mike entered, his broad frame filling the doorway. He spotted Mark in a booth by the window and made his way over, his expression a mix of determination and trepidation. "Thanks for meeting me," Mark said as Mike slid into the seat across from him. "Let's talk about what you found." Mike placed the small evidence bag on the table, the remnants of Emily's prom dress peeking through the transparent plastic. "This dress, it's a piece of the puzzle, isn't it?" he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "Yeah, it is," Mark replied, feeling the gravity of the moment. "But it's not just the dress. That note you found, it could be crucial. We need to decipher what it says." Mike nodded, his brow furrowing. "I've been thinking about it. The words seemed like a warning." "But warning about what?" Mark leaned closer, his fingers tracing the edge of the evidence bag. "We need to find out who wrote it. It's possible that whoever it was knew something about Jake and Emily's disappearance. We also need to talk to Mrs. Miller again. She might remember more about that argument she saw." "Right. I'll reach out to her," Mike said, his voice steady. "But what about Tom Sullivan? You think he could still be involved?" Mark took a moment to consider the question. Tom had always been a controversial figure in Maplewood, a man whose life had spiraled after the couple vanished. "He's still a person of interest, but I want to tread carefully. We have to build our case on solid ground, not just rumors." As they spoke, the diner buzzed with life, the clatter of dishes and the murmur of conversations creating a comforting backdrop. Yet beneath the surface, a tension simmered. Mark could sense the weight of the community's unresolved grief lingering in the air, wrapped around them like a fog. After they wrapped up their discussion, Mark and Mike left the diner, stepping into the cool afternoon air. The clouds above had thickened, and a light drizzle began to fall, creating a rhythmic patter against the pavement. They headed back to the town hall, where Mark intended to dig deeper into the old case files. As he sifted through the documents, a photograph caught his eye, a grainy image of Jake and Emily, arms wrapped around each other, smiling brightly against the backdrop of the school's prom decorations. It had been taken just hours before they vanished. Mark's heart ached at the sight. They had so much ahead of them, so many dreams that would never see the light of day. He pulled out his notebook and jotted down a list of questions he wanted to ask Mrs. Miller, hoping to uncover more details about that fateful argument. With renewed determination, he grabbed his jacket and turned to Mike, who was still examining the evidence bag. "Let's go talk to Mrs. Miller," Mark said, his voice firm. "We need to see if she remembers anything else about that night." As they drove through Maplewood, the town felt different, like a shadow of its former self. The vibrant colors of spring were dulled by the weight of the past. The streets seemed to whisper secrets, each corner a reminder of what had been lost. Mark stole glances at the familiar landmarks, each one a ghost of memories he'd rather forget. Mrs. Miller's house sat on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a modest garden that had once been filled with blooming roses but now appeared overgrown and wild. Mark knocked on the door, and a moment later the weary face of Mrs. Miller appeared, her eyes widening in recognition. "Detective Jennings," she said, her voice tinged with surprise. "It's been years. What brings you here?" "We have new information regarding Jake and Emily," Mark replied, his tone gentle yet urgent. "May we come in?" Mrs. Miller hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, allowing them to enter. The interior of her home was cozy but cluttered, filled with photographs and trinkets that told the story of a life well lived. Yet, there was an air of sadness that clung to the walls, a testament to her lingering grief. "Please, take a seat," she offered, gesturing toward the couch. "What do you want to know?" Mark exchanged a glance with Mike before speaking. "We're trying to piece together what happened on prom night. You mentioned seeing Jake and Emily arguing with a man. Can you tell us more about that?" Mrs. Miller's expression shifted, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "It was dark, and I didn't see much. But I remember the way Jake looked. He was upset, and Emily seemed scared. There was a man with them, but I couldn't make out his face." "Do you remember anything about what they were arguing about?" Mark pressed gently, sensing the weight of her memories. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. I can't recall the exact words, but it felt serious. It was as if they were in danger. I wanted to help, but I didn't know what to do. Mark's heart raced as he jotted down her words. Thank you, Mrs. Miller. This could be important for the case. If you think of anything else, please reach out. I will, she promised, her voice barely above a whisper. I just want to see justice for them. As they left her home, the clouds finally opened, unleashing a torrential downpour. The rain drummed against the pavement, but Mark felt an inexplicable sense of clarity. Each new detail was a thread weaving together the tapestry of the past, drawing him closer to the truth. Do you think we're getting closer? Mike asked, pulling his collar up against the rain. I hope so, Mark replied, determination igniting within him. We have to uncover what happened, not just for Jake and Emily, but for this community. They deserve closure. As they drove back toward Town Hall, the rain poured down relentlessly, but within the storm lay the promise of revelations yet to come. The past was awakening, and with it, the specter of justice loomed ever closer. The sun dipped low over Maplewood, bathing the town in a wash of orange and pink, casting long shadows that stretched across the remnants of the high school gym. Mike stood amidst the scattered debris, the air thick with dust and the acrid smell of aged wood. The discovery of Emily's dress and the note felt like a jolt from the past, igniting the embers of a mystery that had long smoldered in the hearts of the townsfolk. Detective Mark Jennings had returned to the site, his expression a mix of determination and nostalgia. He surveyed the area where the time capsule had been unearthed, his mind racing through the fragments of memories associated with that fateful night. The whispers of the past echoed in his ears, urging him to uncover the truth. Mike, Mark called, stepping closer. You're sure this is where you found it? Yeah, right here, Mike replied, gesturing to the ground, still littered with remnants of the gym's glory days. I can't believe it's been 18 years. It feels like yesterday when everyone was so excited for prom. And now, it's like we're digging up ghosts. Mark nodded, his gaze locked on the spot. Ghosts or not, we've got to follow this lead. The note, it's a warning. Someone wanted to protect them. That means someone knew something. The two men exchanged a glance, an unspoken understanding passing between them. The investigation was no longer about just Jake and Emily. It was about the lives intertwined with theirs, the threads of secrets that had frayed but not broken over the years. Let's head over to the library, Mark suggested, turning on his heel. I want to see if we can find anything about that man Mrs. Miller mentioned. We need a face to go with the shadow. As they drove, the streets of Maplewood felt heavy with history. The town had changed since that tragic night, but remnants of its past lingered in the architecture, the stories whispered among the older residents, and the fading photographs that hung in the diner. Mike glanced out the window, remembering how vibrant the town had once been, filled with laughter and hope, before everything turned dark. The library stood stoically at the end of Maple Avenue, its facade a blend of brick and ivy, a sanctuary of knowledge amidst the changing world. They entered the cool interior, the scent of aged paper and wood mingling in the air. Mark approached the librarian, a silver-haired woman named Clara, who had seen the town through its ups and downs. Clara, Mark greeted her, his voice steady. We're looking into the disappearance of Jake Thompson and Emily Carter. I was hoping you might have some old records or newspaper clippings from around that time. Her eyes widened slightly, the weight of the memories evident. Of course, Detective. It was a tragedy that shook this town to its core. Follow me. Clara led them to a back room filled with shelves brimming with archival boxes. She pulled out a few yellowed clippings. The ink faded, but the headline still bold. Prom night disappearance leaves community in shock, and search continues for missing couple. The articles were riddled with photos of Jake and Emily, young and smiling, a stark contrast to the grim reality that had unfolded. Mike's heart sank as he flipped up through the pages, each article a reminder of the hope that had turned to despair. Didn't anyone ever see anything? He muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. People saw things, but sometimes they didn't know what they were seeing, Clara said gently. And other times, they were too afraid to speak up. This town has its secrets, you know. Mark nodded, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. Do you have anything on Tom Sullivan? I've heard his name come up a few times. Clara hesitated, her brow furrowing. Tom was a troubled young man. He had a rough upbringing, and the town never really accepted him. After that night, he seemed to vanish too. Vanished, Mike echoed, intrigued. What do you mean? His family moved away shortly after Jake and Emily disappeared. There were whispers about him being involved, but nothing ever came of it. He was just gone. Mark's pen scratched against his notepad as he jotted down notes. He could feel the pieces shifting, forming a clearer picture, but there were still too many gaps. Can you find out where his family went? Maybe they still have connections here. Sure, I can help with that, Clara replied, her voice softening. But be careful. Some people don't take kindly to digging up the past. Right, Mark said, a chill running down his spine at her words. We'll tread lightly. As they left the library, the weight of their discovery hung over them like a storm cloud. They needed answers, but the more they unearthed, the more they felt the threads of mystery tightening around them. With the town's secrets lurking just beneath the surface, they had to be cautious. Where to next? Mike asked, breaking the silence as they climbed back into the truck. I think it's time we paid Tom Sullivan's old neighborhood a visit, Mark replied, determination lacing his voice. If anyone knows where he ended up, it'll be the people who live there. The drive took them to the outskirts of town, where the streets grew quieter and the houses more sparse. The once thriving neighborhood had fallen into disrepair, the paint peeling and yards overgrown. Memories of laughter and joy seemed to hang in the air, but they were overshadowed by a pervasive silence, as if the ghosts of the past still lingered, watching. Mark parked the truck near what was once Tom's home, a modest structure that had seen better days. He stepped out, the crunch of gravel underfoot echoing in the stillness. Let's see what we can find, he said, glancing at Mike. As they approached the house, an elderly woman sat on the porch, her gnarled hands cradling a faded photograph. She looked up, her eyes sharp despite her age. Can I help you? She inquired, her voice steady. Ma'am, we're looking for information on Tom Sullivan, Mark said, trying to gauge her reaction. He lived here a long time ago. The woman's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition passing through her eyes. Tom, that boy was trouble, she said, her tone sharp, always getting into fights. I heard he moved away after, well, you know. After what? Mike pressed, leaning in slightly. After Jake and Emily disappeared, she continued, her voice lowering. People said he was involved, but I don't know for sure. All I know is that he left without a word, and the town was glad to see him go. Do you remember where his family went? Mark asked, a sense of urgency building within him. She hesitated, her gaze distant, as if lost in a memory. They went to some place called Millfield. That's all I know. It was a relief to have peace again, but I still feel for those kids. They deserve better. Thank you, ma'am, Mark said, his heart racing. We appreciate your help. As they walked back to the truck, Mike turned to Mark. Millfield, that's not far from here. We should check it out. Exactly, Mark replied, his mind already mapping their next steps. But we need to be careful. If Tom Sullivan is still out there, we don't know what he could be capable of. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a cloak of darkness over Maplewood as they drove toward Millfield. The tension in the air was palpable, the weight of the past pressing down on them with every passing mile. With each moment, the urgency of their mission grew, intertwining with the threads of hope and fear that had woven themselves into the fabric of their lives. As they entered Millfield, the quiet streets felt almost suffocating. The houses lined up like sentinels guarding their secrets. This was more than just a search for answers. It was a journey into the heart of a mystery that had festered for too long. Mark could feel the shadows closing in, but he was determined to shine a light on the darkness that had haunted Maplewood for nearly 2 decades. Let's find Tom Sullivan, he said, his voice resolute as they navigated the unfamiliar streets. It's time someone confronted the truth. The air in Millfield felt heavier than the humid August evening should have allowed. Detective Mark Jennings stepped out of his car, the worn leather of the seat creaking in protest as he closed the door behind him. The small town had its own rhythm, distinct from Maplewood, and tonight it throbbed with a mix of anticipation and dread. He surveyed the street, lined with aging houses that seemed to lean into one another, whispering secrets of their own. Mike, who had accompanied him, adjusted his cap, glancing around as if he were a deer caught in headlights. "You think we'll find anything?" he asked, his voice low, almost swallowed by the stillness of the night. Mark nodded, his mind racing through the details they had gathered. Tom Sullivan's family has been here for years. If he's hiding something, it might be buried deep in this town's history. The pair walked towards the Sullivan home, a modest two-story structure with peeling paint and an overgrown yard that hinted at neglect. As they approached the front steps, a dim light flickered in the window, illuminating the shadow of a figure moving inside. "Let's see if we can talk to someone," Mark suggested, his instincts sharper than ever. He knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the quiet evening. The moments stretched as they waited, tension crackling in the air like a gathering storm. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing a woman in her late 50s, her hair streaked with gray, but still thick and wild. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she scrutinized them. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice edged with suspicion. "Mrs. Sullivan." Mark introduced himself, showing his badge. "We're looking for information about your son, Tom. We believe he might know something about the disappearance of Jake Thompson and Emily Carter." A flicker of recognition crossed her face, but she quickly masked it with a stoic expression. "Tom's not here," she replied curtly. "Do you know where we can find him?" Mike interjected, his tone sincere. "It's important." Mrs. Sullivan stepped back, folding her arms tightly across her chest. "You should leave things alone. The past is done. Tom's not the monster you think he is." Mark exchanged a glance with Mike. "We're not here to judge. We just want to understand what happened that night." With a huff, she leaned against the doorframe, the lines on her face deepening. "You think it's that simple? You think you can just waltz in here and dig up old ghosts? People in this town have suffered enough." "Please," Mark pressed, his voice steady but urgent. "We're trying to find justice for Jake and Emily. They deserve that much." Mrs. Sullivan's facade cracked just a little. "Justice. Justice is a luxury for those who still have hope. You think their families moved on? You think it doesn't feel like a knife in the gut every single day?" Silence settled between them, thick with unspoken pain. The memories of that night had clawed at the community long enough, and it was clear that Mrs. Sullivan carried her own burdens. "Tom left town after it happened," she finally whispered, her gaze dropping to the ground. "But I don't know where he is now. I wish I did." Mark felt a pang of sympathy for the woman standing before him, caught between her loyalty to her son and the haunting reality of their past. "We just want to help. If you hear from him, please let us know." With a reluctant nod, she stepped back and closed the door, leaving Mark and Mike alone on the porch, the weight of her sorrow hanging in the air. "Do you think she knows more?" Mike asked, his brow furrowed in thought. "She knows something," Mark replied, "but it's buried deep. We need to find a way to draw it out." They returned to the car, the evening air growing cooler as the sun dipped below the horizon. Mark flipped through the notes they had gathered, pondering their next move. "Let's check out the old high school again. There might be something we missed." As they drove the familiar route back to Maplewood, Mark's mind raced with possibilities. The time capsule had opened a door to the past, but it felt like they were still standing on the threshold, unable to step through. The cryptic note, the missing couple, and Tom Sullivan's mysterious absence all wove together into a tapestry of secrets that begged to be unraveled. Arriving at the abandoned high school gym, the moonlight cast eerie shadows across the cracked pavement. The air smelled of damp earth and nostalgia, each breeze whispering the memories of laughter and heartbreak. Mark parked the car and stepped out, the crunch of gravel underfoot breaking the stillness. "Where do we even start?" Mike asked, his voice low as he scanned the darkened building. Mark approached the entrance, the heavy door creaking open as he pushed it aside. The dim light from their flashlights danced across the walls, illuminating faded memories, the remnants of a once vibrant space now cloaked in dust and decay. "Let's head back to the gymnasium," Mark suggested. "That's where the time capsule was buried. Maybe we can find more clues." As they made their way across the floor, the wooden boards creaked beneath their weight, a haunting reminder of the joy that once filled the space. They reached the spot where the capsule had been unearthed, and Mark knelt down, running his fingers over the ground, feeling for any signs they might have overlooked. "Look over here," Mike said, his voice barely a whisper as he pointed to a small, weathered patch of earth. "It looks like something was disturbed recently." Mark's heart quickened. He shifted his flashlight to get a better look, and his breath caught in his throat. A small, rusted metal object glinted in the light, half buried in the soil. He carefully unearthed it, revealing a locket adorned with intricate designs, the surface marred by time and neglect. "Is that—" Mike began, but Mark cut him off, his mind racing. "Let's open it," he urged, the sense of urgency surging through him. He pried it open, revealing two photographs, one of a young Jake, his signature smile radiating warmth. The other of Emily, her eyes bright with life. A rush of memories flooded back, a vivid reminder of the love that had once flourished between them. But it was the handwritten note tucked into the locket that held Mark's attention. He carefully unfolded the fragile paper, the ink faded but still legible. "If you find this, I hope it means we made it through. But if not, remember, he was there. The danger was real." Asterisk Mark's heart raced as he processed the implications of the message. "Mike, this changes everything." "What do you mean?" Mike asked, shifting closer to read the note. "It confirms there was something or someone threatening them that night. We need to follow this lead. We have to find out who he is." They exchanged a determined glance, the urgency of their mission igniting a fire within them. This was no longer just about uncovering the truth of a tragic night. It was about unearthing the shadows that had loomed over Maplewood for nearly 2 decades. "Let's get back to the station," Mark said, tucking the locket safely into his pocket. "We need to put together everything we have and figure out who could have been a threat to them." As they exited the gym, the weight of the past hung heavily in the air. But for the first time in years, hope flickered like a candle in the darkness. They were not just seeking answers. They were poised on the brink of unveiling a long-buried truth that could finally set the restless spirits of Jake and Emily free. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over Maplewood, as Detective Mark Jennings and Mike stood beside the remnants of the old community center, now reduced to rubble and memories. The air was thick with dust and anticipation, a reminder that the past was never truly buried. Clutching the locket containing Jake and Emily's photographs, Mark felt the weight of unresolved grief pressing down on his shoulders. He turned to Mike, whose burly frame seemed to bear the burden of the town's collective sorrow. "Do you think this can lead us somewhere?" Mike asked, his voice gruff yet laced with excitement. He rubbed at the rugged stubble on his chin, his brow furrowing as he stared at the locket. "It has to," Mark replied, determination flaring in his chest. "This isn't just a piece of jewelry, it's a piece of their story. We need to find out why it was hidden here and what it means." The note tucked inside the locket had sent chills down Mark's spine. The ink was faded but legible. "They'll never believe you. Danger is closer than you think. Asterisk." The words echoed in his mind, fueling his curiosity and dread. What had Jake and Emily stumbled upon that night? And who had wanted to silence them? With a nod of understanding, Mike pulled out his phone. "Let's start with Tom Sullivan. If he left town right after they disappeared, he might know something we don't." As they made their way back to the makeshift command center set up near the site, Mark's mind raced with possibilities. Tom had always been a bit of an outsider, despite having grown up in Maplewood. His reputation had shifted after the couple vanished, whispered about in the shadows of the town. Could he be the key to unlocking the truth? After a quick search, they discovered that Tom had settled in a neighboring town, a small city that felt worlds away from Maplewood. It was a place where secrets could linger like smoke in the air, and the two men agreed they needed to confront him. The drive felt like a pilgrimage through memories. The familiar landscape of Maplewood soon melted into a blur of fields and trees, punctuated by the occasional old barn or farmhouse. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue over the countryside, but the beauty of the moment was lost on Mark. Thoughts of Jake and Emily clouded his mind. "Do you think he'll talk?" Mike asked, breaking the silence that had enveloped them. "He has to," Mark replied, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "After all these years, he might be ready to share what he knows. Or maybe he's been waiting for someone to ask." The small town of Riverview appeared on the horizon, a stark contrast to Maplewood's close-knit community. As they pulled into a parking lot beside a modest diner, Mark felt a flutter of nervous energy. He had spent years trying to piece together the events of that fateful night, and now they were closer than ever to finding answers. Inside the diner, the smell of frying bacon and freshly baked pies mingled in the air, a stark reminder of the normalcy that so often masked buried pain. They spotted Tom in a booth at the back, his features worn but familiar. He had aged, but there was a haunted look in his eyes that hadn't faded with time. Mark approached him first, Mike hovering just behind, a supportive presence. "Tom Sullivan," he said, keeping his tone steady. Tom looked up, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the badge. "What do you want?" he replied, his voice gruff. "We'd like to talk about Jake and Emily," Mark said, taking a seat across from him. At the mention of their names, Tom's expression shifted, a flicker of something fear, guilt, crossing his face. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but closed it again, hesitation thickening the air between them. 18 years later, and people are still asking about them, he muttered, his gaze dropping to the table. "What's there to say?" "Everything," Mike interjected, his voice rising slightly. "You left town right after they vanished. You must know something." Tom ran a hand through his thinning hair, frustration etched on his brow. "You think I wanted this? I didn't have a choice. The way people looked at me, the whispers, it was suffocating." Mark leaned in, his heart pounding. "What do you mean you didn't have a choice? Did you see something? Did you hear something?" Tom's eyes darted around the diner, as if searching for escape. "I didn't see anything," he said, his voice low, "but I heard things that scared me. I was at the party that night. I saw them leave together." "Who else was there?" Mark pressed, sensing that they were on the brink of a breakthrough. Tom hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. "There were rumors about a group, some kids who got into trouble. They were saying Jake and Emily had crossed them, that they were going to make them pay." A chill ran down Mark's spine. "And you didn't think to tell anyone?" "I was scared," Tom snapped, his hands clenching into fists. "I thought if I stayed quiet, I'd be safe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. So I left. I thought it was the only way." "Who were they?" Mike pressed, his voice steady. "Who were these kids?" "I don't know their names," Tom admitted, his voice trembling. "Just that they were bad news. They had a reputation. I didn't want to get involved, but I should have said something. I should have helped them." Mark exchanged a look with Mike, their minds racing with the implications. "What about the note?" Mark asked, pulling out the crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "Do you recognize this?" Tom's eyes widened as he took the note, a flash of recognition igniting his features. I think I've seen this before. It was in the air that night, a sense of danger, but I didn't connect it until now. It felt like a warning." "Do you think it was meant for them?" Mike asked, leaning in closer. "Maybe," Tom replied, his voice barely a whisper. "Maybe it was meant for all of us." Mark felt the weight of those words settle heavily on his chest. The pieces were beginning to align, but they still lacked a clear picture. "You need to come back to Maplewood with us," he said, determination in his tone. "There are people who need to hear this. Maybe together we can finally uncover what happened that night." Tom hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. "What if they find out? What if they come after me again?" "They can't keep hiding forever," Mark said firmly. "This town deserves the truth, and so do Jake and Emily." With a heavy sigh, Tom nodded, the resolve slowly building within him. "All right, let's do it, but we need to be careful." As they left the diner, Mark felt a renewed sense of purpose. The shadows of the past were slowly beginning to lift, but the path to justice was fraught with danger. The truth about Jake and Emily's disappearance was still shrouded in mystery, but for the first time in nearly 2 decades, it felt like they were finally on the right track. The drive back to Maplewood was charged with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Mark glanced at Tom in the back seat, the man's face a tapestry of regret and fear. This was not just about the couple anymore. It was about a community healing from wounds that had festered for far too long. As the familiar skyline of Maplewood loomed ahead, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to unearth something monumental. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. Justice had been waiting far too long, and it was time to confront the ghosts of prom night.